Welcome to Study with the Best, the magazine show about CUNY. I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Vespina. Believe it or not, there are still writers out there who do more than tweet in 140 characters or less. And some of the best novelists, journalists, essayists, and even cartoonists are represented right here at CUNY. On this edition of Study with the Best, we'll meet Hunter College professor Colum McCann, author of what Esquire magazine called the first great 9/11 novel.
And we'll visit the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Resource Center and Archives at Queensborough Community College for an eye-opening exhibit on the work of American cartoonists during the Holocaust.
We'll attend the 9th Annual National Black Writers Conference at Medgar Evers College.
And Barry Mitchell, with a Hunter College graduate, whose new memoir uncovers her father's secret criminal past. So, stay tuned. In Colum McCann's National Book Award-winning novel, Let the Great World Spin, real-life funambulist Philip Petit's illicit tightrope walk between the Twin Towers in 1974 mysteriously brings together 10 ordinary yet unforgettable stories taking place in a decadent New York City. The Hunter College professor of creative writing opens up about his work, his teaching, and his interest in finding the hope and meaning in life's precariousness and despair. Those who saw him hushed on Church Street, Liberty, Cortlandt, West Street, Fulton, Vesey. It was a silence that heard itself awful and beautiful. Some thought at first it must have been a trick of the light, something to do with the weather, an accident of shadow fall. Others figured it might be the perfect city joke. Stand around and point upward until people gathered, tilted their heads, nodded, affirmed, until all were staring upward at nothing at all. Like waiting for the end of a Lenny Bruce gag. But the longer they watched, the surer they were. He stood at the very edge of the building, shaped dark against the gray of morning. A window washer maybe, or a construction worker, or a jumper. Up there, at the height of 110 stories, utterly still, a dark toy against a cloudy sky.
I suppose Let the Great World Spin is a novel that takes place primarily in August 1974, on the day when a sort of nameless tightrope walker based on the French tightrope walker Philippe Petit crosses between the World Trade Center towers. But really, the book only uses that as a motif, and what the primary part is the lives of those people who were on the street and in the city on that same day, and how these sort of strange acts of circumstance and collusion and accident all sort of come together to make up a sort of mosaic of who we are. After 9/11, I started thinking about, how does one talk about the World Trade Center towers? And it seemed to me that it was an interesting metaphor to go back to a time of sort of creation and grace and meaning. 9/11 was such a spectacular act of destruction and evil and disintegration. It would be interesting to put an act of beauty in opposition to it. And the more I went back, the more I realized that there were certain things happening then that are certainly proper questions for now. Maybe that's always the truth, that when we look at the past, it informs the present. But for me, I looked at 74 when the soldiers were coming home from Vietnam. And, we have the questions that are still going on today about Iraq and Afghanistan. The first emails were sent in the summer of 1974. These questions of technology, so I had all these what we call phone phreakers, who were the forerunners of computer hackers. You had sort of a politics that was fractured and mired in all sorts of controversy, and Watergate was going on, Nixon was about to resign. Take that time, press it down onto our current time, and there is a flower print that it makes upon where we happen to be now. So that in trying to look and understand who we are, sometimes it's a good idea to look and try and understand where we were and who we were, a short time ago.
It was Compton who got the message on the ARPANET this morning. It came over the AP service on the 24-hour message board. We didn't believe it at first, some guy walking the wires high above New York, but then Compton got on the line with an operator, pretending he was a switchman, testing out some verification trunks on the payphones, said he needed some numbers down close to the World Trade Center buildings. Part of an emergency line analysis, he said. And then we programmed the numbers in, skipped them through the system, and we each took bets on whether he'd fall or not. Simple as that. The signals bounce to the computer, multi-frequency bips like something on a flute, and we catch the guy on the 9th ring.
It seems to me that one of the great joys of fiction is that we can inhabit the bodies and the minds of others. We can live away from ourselves for a little while. Part of that is, I think, a certain desire to wound yourself, a certain desire to say, I don't want to live with this carcass anymore. Let me get out of it. Another part of it is what I would hope to be a sort of empathy for the other story, and sort of broadening of yourself by broadening out into others. When I teach at Hunter, what I say to my students is that everybody tells you that you should write about what you know about, and I say forget about that for a little while and write towards what you want to know. In other words, write what you don't necessarily know, and then you will discover en route what it is that you wanted to know. One of the reasons I really like teaching in the City University system is the students, they're coming in from all sorts of different places. I love the meld of languages, like people slamming through the corridors and like this big, vibrant colour of people. None of them feel like I, as a teacher, owe them. They've all got their own story to tell. I want to be taught by the students who come in. I want to be open to conversation. I want to learn from them in the same way, maybe hopefully that they'll learn from me. Winning the National Book Award had like extraordinary effect on my email account. But in terms of what it does and what it means to me to be up there with that list of writers from Don DeLillo and E.L. Doctorow and Toni Morrison, and it was a huge moment in my life, and I felt greatly humbled by it and a little bit frightened. And also, you get a lot of new readers, and that's a fantastic thing. Best advice that I can give to young writers is read, and then read some more. You got to acknowledge the fact that it's going to be tough, and the words may never come out as well as you want them to be. To tell honest stories and to work them through. If you'd have told me 20 years that I'd be sitting here, looking out over New York, talking about my career as a writer, I would have laughed and said, I don't think that's quite possible. But anything's possible, I suppose.
The Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Research Center and Archives at Queensborough Community College hosted an exhibit entitled American Cartoonists, Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. This exhibit highlights the courageous work of numerous cartoonists who spoke out against the Holocaust and Nazi Germany with the use of their art and expression in comic books.
What prompted me to suggest that we prepare this exhibit probably goes back to my childhood when we wanted to read comic books. And we were not, or my parents at least, never encouraged me to read comic books. In those days, comic books was looked upon as secondary literature. Nevertheless, maybe because they said that I shouldn't do it, I did it. And in those days, Superman was probably the most popular of magazines for children. Little did I know that the character of Superman was created by two Jewish young men, originally from Montreal. I also didn't know that when they created the character, they were reacting, even though they never said so openly and publicly, that they were reacting to Nazi Germany and what was occurring in Nazi Germany.
I won't forget one photo. It had the cover of the Captain America first ever issue, where he actually punches Adolf Hitler in the face. At that moment, you wouldn't have thought that this would be shown in America. Like you would have thought that that was going way too far, but actually it wasn't. They talked about how Germany used it as propaganda against America, saying that comic books aren't works of art. Meanwhile, here, they were used as works of art.
I remember as a kid reading Superman, and the bad guys were the Nazis. I remember reading Captain America, and again, the bad guys there were the Nazis that came in. A lot of this experience that I had as far as a youngster growing up and reading comic books suddenly came back to me as we began doing it, and I realized one thing very important, that it was not just a story being told to me when I read Superman fighting the Nazis. What I realized was the authors were sending a very powerful public relations message that this is what's coming.
In the beginning of cartoon art, when the subject is being taken on by Superman, there are a few others, but very, very few. Then there is a silence about it for about 40 years, and only about the 1980s, the subject is taken on again, which follows really with what happened on a general level, and that is that until the Holocaust became a subject for study, for research, it took decades. Survivors didn't want to talk about it. They were too traumatized to talk about it.
Speaking as a comic book person who loves different type of varieties of comics, it's a really nice way of showing bigotry and hate in the comic book realm, where you're mixing, different stories, especially with Superman, Captain America, and you just got a whole mix of things of how they react to the Nazi and Germany and stuff like that. I love X-Men. So there's one about Magneto, and anybody who knows the story about Magneto, he was a survivor of the Holocaust. So they have a personal little thing where he finally gets his powers and he escapes from the camp and stuff like that. So that's pretty much my favorite. So it's a really nice exhibit, especially if you love comic books.
It is the battle between good and evil. And that's how I was thinking about possible exhibits that we can do at the center that may be of interest to a larger audience, to Jews and non-Jews, to children, to adults, to teenagers, to college students, because I realized that this speaks to everyone. This meaning this kind of material speaks to everyone.
In the spring of 2008, Medgar Evers College hosted its 9th annual National Black Writers Conference. The conference, themed Black Writers, Reading and Writing to Transform Their Lives and the World, included panel discussions, readings, workshops, and conversations that focused on the ways in which Black writers use their literature to transform their lives and the world.
Good evening and welcome again. Welcome to the 9th National Black Writers Conference. This conference is the dream, the realization of the dream of the late John Oliver Killens, who started the first conference in 1986. It builds on the 2006 conference where we talked about how Black literature is crossing boundaries of genres, of race, of history. Marita Golden at that conference said, "When I write to transform myself and the world.
I came in today for the conference, and I'm just amazed at listening to all the conversations about poetry, about Katrina, about what it really means at some point to read and write. I think the most important thing that I hope people understand, what poets have done, writers have done, is that beginning for us in the 20th century, we began to try to answer the question, what does it mean to be human? Whether the poetry is fragmented, whether it is traditional, whether it is about something that you know or don't know, whether it's in dialogue form, whatever form it is in, people are trying to look up and say simply, we've got to begin to answer that question, what does it mean to be human? And how do I fit into that?
I think we've not had the chance to yet have a full impact in terms of our literature in dealing with Katrina. I think that some of the impact of it is still to come. There was a woman who told, she was being evacuated to Arkansas, and she told a New York Times reporter when she saw the cotton fields, oh, they're going to slave us. And I thought, thank God that woman wrote that comment down, because Katrina unearthed a collective memory that we all have and that perhaps still needs to be documented.
I plan to be here all day and all night, wrestling with this issue, really what does it mean to be a writer in the early part of the 21st century, especially a writer who is sensitive to and rooted in the catastrophic circumstances of being a New World African, from slavery to the killing fields of hoods these days. Right. What form do we use? What are the ways in which we go about both informing as well as transforming? And then how does one relate to the community, the context larger than oneself, so you get outside of just an egocentric predicament and try to connect and relate to others who are trying to find their voices.
What I practiced as a journalist took me to the places where the hidden things were, and I dug them up, even if it meant going to the war front. So the closer you get to the truth, the more in danger you're going to be in this society.
In 1967, I was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and the evidence was a poem called Black People. And the judge said, this poem is a prescription for criminal anarchy. So I said, Judge, you think that the people came in my house and read the poem, then went out and burned up Newark? Is that what you're saying? 3 years, no parole. But no, it's weird because at the same time they say that, like what's his name, Auden said, poetry means nothing. It don't mean nothing. If it don't mean nothing, how come you always get me in trouble with it? I mean, if poetry is meaningless, then how come somebody want to lock you up for it? All the poets, the best-known poets in New Jersey, Walt Whitman, William Carlos Williams, Allen Ginsberg, and Amiri Baraka all got busted for poetry, nothing else. No other stuff. He wasn't running guns, he was running poetry.
Now, is it possible for our words and our writings to have that kind of ennoblement and enablement and empowerment for people who've been taught to hate themselves and despise themselves and demean themselves and think somehow they are disempowered perennially, rather than being relatively powerless in regard to money and things, but deeply powerful in terms of culture and spirit and love and so forth and so on. So that's the framework by which I come to this question of what it means we overcome.
Okay.
Think you really know your parents? Ever wonder if they have another life you know nothing about? Barry Mitchell talks with a Hunter College alumna who stumbled upon a family secret so chilling she had to write a book about it.
Jennifer Massey is here. She's a Hunter College graduate and a journalist at the Metro desk of the New York Times. Let's play a little game.
Sure.
You're in grade school. It's career day. Everyone's father is coming up to say what he does for a living. What does your dad tell the class he does for a living?
He's a carpet cleaner. My dad is a carpet cleaner.
Yes, he was, but the dirt went deeper. Jennifer's loving, attentive father was also a career criminal, a low-level, mob-connected drug dealer from Bay Ridge who served 12 years for murder. Jennifer's attempts to pump her secretive mom for information and her quest to make sense of her upbringing that included being an unwitting fugitive is the subject of her new memoir, Never Tell Our Business to Strangers.
He was arrested for cocaine possession. And when you have a murder charge on your record, that's quite a parole violation. You could go back to jail for a long time. So he took my mother and me, I was an infant, and we ran across the country, and we were fugitives for 5 years.
Then one day in 1982, the feds came knocking.
When I was 5, I saw him get arrested in front of me. I knew it had to be bad.
And after Dad does another 8 months in the slammer, one day Dad just walks in the front door and their suburban Southern California lifestyle continues.
I was a normal kid. I went to cheerleading practice, you know, I was in the drama club, and I had dinner with my parents every night. And my father went to my plays, and he read everything I wrote for the school newspaper. When you're kind of living in a cocoon, it was like a homemade witness protection program. And you're taught not to trust anyone outside of it. Even now, I still think of them as soulmates, the people who understood me the best. You know, we were buffeted by forces, is the impression I get from my childhood, and the three of us were kind of forming a force field. And we turn to each other in times of crisis. We're gonna make it, we're gonna be okay. They've both passed now. My father 9 years ago, my mother in 2006. I decided to write the book after my mother died. She was on her deathbed, and she admitted to me the last part of the story, which is that my father's career had an unreported body count, that before we went on the lam, he was dealing drugs, and one of the byproducts of his job, my mother said, was to bump off people who double-crossed him or owed him money. And Jenny, why are you getting so angry? It was just part of his business. It cast my mother in a very different light. I mean, she was closest to me than anyone in my life, and she was hiding this secret for this man all these years. She let a murderer raise her child.
There were no murders that took place while you were alive, is that right?
When I was an infant.
Oh.
Yeah, before the parole violation. I think one of the reasons they ran across the country was they were afraid that he was going to get picked up for those murders.
Let's take a walk.
Yeah, sure.
While you're doing your research for your book, you say you alternately hated, pitied, cursed, and cried over your dad.
Yes.
What's left now? What's the overriding emotion?
You know, after a while, I just kind of gave up. After a while, I just said, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm really most upset over the fact that he died. I never, ever discussed my father's prison record with him, and, you know, in a way, it's a missed opportunity, but mostly I just miss him.
Same thing with your mom?
Yes. I would come to my mother with everything instead of a friend. My friends didn't find out about this until years later. I kept it bottled inside because you don't tell your business to strangers. They're not your blood.
A great deal of your book is spent describing in minute detail your parents struggled with terminal cancer. And it's tough to read. I'm sure it was tough to write. Why go into that much detail?
I find that people really shy away from talking about end-of-life issues. And I wanted to, you know, being the first of my friends to go through this, losing both parents, I kind of wanted to let everyone know what it's like. My friends, you know, my loved ones have said I had to put the book down for a little while because it's tough stuff.
Talk about the significance of this park. We're in Carl Schurz Park on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
Yeah. After my father died, I'd been living in East Harlem for about a year when he passed away, and every time I was grief-stricken, I would come here. Then I took to running in the park, and that gave me a feeling of well-being, and that was the way I pounded out my grief, coming to this park and running every night. They were lifelong New Yorkers, except for the 15 years we lived in California. And, you know, eventually I scattered my parents' ashes off the side here into the East River. I didn't need their ashes now. I could carry our history with me. I studied my hands, which resembled my mother's more every day, and understood that I was part of them. I could be their memorial. I had to let them go. "I'll never forget you," I whispered to the river as I reached back and threw the whole jar into the black carpet of water.
But there's a happy ending. Although Jennifer was an only child, her dad had children from his first marriage. And though her father avoided them when Jennifer was growing up,
I decided when he passed away that I wasn't going to be like that. You know, I wasn't going to let what he felt cost my relationships with my siblings. And even though they're old enough to be my aunts and uncles, we're still close. And their kids are in their 20s, so there's like a 10-year age difference there, so it's not too bad. And they live in Florida. And, you know, when it's freezing here, it's nice to step off a plane where it's 80 degrees there.
And the book is called Never Tell Our Business to Strangers by Jennifer Massia, published by Villard. And you're watching Study with the Best. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
In the meantime, remember to study.
Study with the best.